privilege to have you speak with us today. Welcome, Julie. Okay. Hello. Oh, so great to be here. I would like to first of all start with a warning that, yes, I am a teacher and an elementary one for my training from 15 years. So if I start talking to you like you're 8, I apologize. I won't give you any dirty looks if you start looking at your cell phone and take it away or anything like that. So I'm hoping that from our talk today that you're going to take something away with you. Something that you might be able to use today, maybe this week, maybe in a month, maybe even a year from now. So again, thank you for this opportunity to talk about one of the most personal and most, important subjects that I've come across is trauma. And it's something I didn't know a lot about. If you would have asked me 6 years ago, what do you know about trauma? How does trauma affect kids? How does it affect their relationships? How does it affect their health? How does it affect their behavior? I would have said, well, yeah, trauma's bad. Yeah, that's so sad. But I didn't really know a lot. And it wasn't until my oldest son, who's my bookend kiddos are adopted. So my oldest was my first foster child, and we're lucky enough to adopt him. But it wasn't until Kavion started exhibiting some behaviors that were different from his peers that I start to wonder, what's going on? What is this? And if you know any teachers, you know that when we have a question and something's bugging us, we won't let go of it. We're like a dog and a bone. It's like, I have to find out more. What is this? So the more I discovered, I found out, read a lot, and the information that I was reading about and learning about trauma started to really, in Unity we say the word resonate, and it truly resonated with me. It's like, yes, the pieces of the puzzle started coming together for me. It's like, that's what it is. This makes so much sense now. Thank God it isn't just me being a bad parent or anything like that. There's a reason for this. And then I got really mad. Because I said, you know what? Why is it that it takes me having a child with trauma after teaching for 15 years? And I teach at the University of Iowa. I teach a class there. I'm in the director of student teaching. I'm not outside of education. Why did it take me to search for this information, to know? Why don't we know this? So, yeah, with that anger, I thought about, you think about all the students you had. You're like, that makes sense. All those students I could have helped had I had this knowledge. But as I was sitting in with my anger, it just so happened, and you know how those it just so happened moments happen, right? It's not just so happens. I happened to be reading a book about past lives and the lives between lives from Michael Newton, and I had a profound experience. As I was sitting with my anger about not knowing about trauma and thinking, what is with this? And then reading about the past lives, it clicked. I truly believe that Kavion and I made a pact with each other before coming into this lifetime. And that pact was, I wanted to experience parenting a child with trauma, and he was willing to step up and say, I will be that child for you. And so I'm hoping that when I cross over and talk with the others on the other side, and they ask me, what did you learn? What lesson did you learn? How did you make the world a better place? I'm hoping that I will be able to say, I was able to understand love, and love in really difficult times, and educate those about trauma. I'm hoping. We'll see. So I'd like to start my talk by asking you to start to do one thing, and that's to change your perception. So when you see a child or even adult exhibiting behaviors that you're like, what's with that? Maybe it's a child who's swearing at someone, a caregiver, someone like their mother, throwing rocks at them. It could be lying in the middle of the street, refusing to move. All of things which have happened. That instead of saying, what's wrong with you? To change that thinking to, what happened to you? What's your story? What happened? And to not get out your cell phone and start taping what's going on. Or to get your lawn chair out to watch the show. Because all of those have happened. I'm like, I have a child here who's going through something pretty intense. But to change that perception of, oh, it's a show, I'm going to watch this, or what's wrong with you, to what happened to you. All right, so what is trauma? Now, like I said, I'm now at the university, so I'm really into PowerPoints. This is how I do my lecture. So, and I do lecture, I have to warn you, I lecture for 50 minutes, so we will get to brunch on time, though. I'm like, I really have to, pare it down. So over here we have a PowerPoint about trauma and a definition, because I think it's important that we start on the same page. Like I said, this talk today is very introductory. This is your appetizer. I'm just whetting your appetite. If we want to continue this education, I'd love to have, a workshop or something in the afternoon at some time to go into further detail about things. But this is just kind of a 101. All right, so trauma is you're a subjective experience. And here are some examples of what they might be. It could be something that's physical. It could be some type of abuse. It could be adoption, foster care, a move, a car accident. Maybe one of the parents is depressed. It could be any of those things. Trauma, maybe going to the hospital, and bullying. And the next slide is one of my favorite slides, because you can't have a slide without, when you have 4 kids, you've got to use them, right? So trauma is subjective. This is a wonderful example of how what's maybe traumatic for me might not be traumatic for you. So here we have my twins, Paul and Pierce. So this was our first Santa visit. Paul, Santa's traumatic for him. It really was. Up until like 2 years ago, they were not friends. He would see Santa and walk the other way. I'm like, Paul, he has presents for you. Didn't matter. He's like, nope, not talking to that weird guy. But Pierce here, Pierce is on the left, is like, yeah, I'm sitting on this guy's lap. He looks weird, but it's okay. So Santa, even though, they've had the same experience, Paul and Pierce, Santa was traumatic for one and not for the other. And the next slide talks a little bit about the brain. So trauma affects, a lot of what we talk about has to do with the brain. So on this left slide, we see the brain. The neocortex. That's where all your good learning happens, right? That's where we want all of our students to be. They're taking in information, they're able to regulate their emotions, life is good. And then when something happens, we call it downshifting, because you're going closer to the brain stem. Because the closer you get to your brain stem, the weirder things happen, and it's not good. So we want to stay away from that. But you downshift one, and then you're in your limbic system, and that's your emotional brain. That's a fun brain. You can tell students and kids, and even adults who have downshifted into their emotional brain, because that's where all the fun words live. Oh, yeah. And something to keep in mind, too, is that when kids have downshifted, there's no reasoning with them, all right? So you can't say, you need to stop that, or else you're not going to get your dessert. Or if you keep doing this, you're in timeout. That means nothing, because they've downshifted. They're not thinking. There is no reasoning in this brain. And if you're thinking, oh, I'm beyond that, I would never go downshift into my emotional brain. I am so beyond that. Let me ask you about the last time someone cut you off in traffic. and your mother-in-law was sitting in the back seat. Even though you maybe didn't want to say some of those words or gestures, they just came out, didn't they? Yeah. And that person sitting next to you, and they're like, really, did you need to do that? Was that necessary? Did you want to hear that from that person at that very moment? No. You're like, shut up. So that's our emotional brain. And then further down, we also have our reptilian brain. This is your fight, your flight, or your freeze brain, right? My son, Kavion, when he gets triggered, when something happens, and sometimes I can't even predict when he's going to get triggered. It could be something that I would think would be okay, and it's not. But when he gets triggered, his reptilian brain, he's a typical eloper. So he likes to run away. And I have just found one of my all-time favorite purchases. I just bought him a watch, which has a GPS on it. Best thing ever, because I was literally in Shields a month ago looking in kayaks and tents going, is he here? I don't know. So a child who's triggered could run away. They could say, I'm going to fight it out, or they could just freeze and not know what to do. This is also a great way of thinking about how your brain thinks. The upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. The upstairs brain, this is where, like the neocortex has all the, this is where we want everyone to be. They're thinking, they're reasoning. And you might be interested to know that upstairs brain does not fully develop until age 25. And so this is good for me to remember when I'm working with my student teachers, that they're not fully developed yet. And I'm like, oh yeah. So that's why sometimes I treat them like second graders, because, it's okay. But yes, so that's where all the good reasoning. And the downstairs brain, that's when they might have trouble focusing or being impulsive or losing their temper. And another fun way to remember about your brain is to take your hand and stick your thumb in, right? This is going to be your reptilian brain, and then to wrap your fingers around your thumb. And then here's your neocortex. Here's where all that good thinking happenings, you can regulate all that good stuff. So when my oldest is triggered, he flips his lid, and there we go. He's in his reptilian brain. So it's a good reminder to say, oh yeah, I can't reason with him right now. I can't offer him consequences. He's not going to hear it. Right. Let's see what our next slide is. As Paula mentioned, I'm an ACE presenter. Like I said, I really got on the bandwagon of trauma, and ACEs is something that came out of San Diego. And it was interesting how it came about. In the 90s, Dr. Folletti on the right, he worked in an obesity clinic. And he had many of his clients lose weight and then gain it back again. And he would talk to them and say, how did this happen? What's going on? And he kept hearing the same things over and over. It's something from my childhood. There was something that happened. And he said, you know what? I think there's something to this. So he talked to his friend, Dr. Anda, who actually happened to be in the CDC. And they said, let's get a survey out about this. Let's figure this out. So they collected some data for over 17,000 participants. Now, these participants were in San Diego. They had insurance because Dr. Folletti worked with Kaiser Permanente. So they had really good insurance. So these were people that lived in San Diego, had good insurance, were fairly white and middle class, right? And they sent out this survey, 17,000 or more got back to them, and they noticed a trend. And they were like, this is really interesting. So Dr. Anda took it even one step further, because with this results, they saw, trauma is not only affecting people just in their relationships and their behavior, but it's also affecting people's health. So from a medical standpoint, let's look at that. So the next slide shows us, ta-da, they came up with a questionnaire. It's the ACEs questionnaire. And oh, am I switching? Hello, there we go. This is fun. I don't get a microphone in my lectures, so I enjoy this. I said I'd probably like to stay away from the Madonna headset because I don't have my cone bra today. So anyway, our adverse childhood experiences, they divided them up into 3 categories. They had household dysfunctions, neglect, and abuse. And this questionnaire is just 10 questions. You can get a score of 0, you can get a score of whatever through 10. And this is how it shook up with those people that filled out the survey. And they were shocked. These were not people filling this out in, like a neighborhood where there's a lot of gang activities, where there's shooting every day. This is in a very middle class, white, educated people. What is with that? So this is, if you're interested in taking the ACE survey, you can just Google it, and there are lots of online, you can take that. On our next slide, they went into more detail about what was going on. So like I said, when you take that survey, people can get a score of 0 through 10. And what they found, and I thought this was really interesting, they call it a dose response. So the more, it's just like you put more gas in your car, you can go further. So they found that the more ACEs you had, the more adverse childhood experiences you had, the higher percentage of health problems you developed. I mean, isn't that just a textbook graph? I mean, does that ever happen? Jill, do you ever see something like that so clearly? No. So there you go. Something so, it's like, wow, that's huge. And our next slide gives you the probability. So if we have 100 adults, if we have 33 of them would shake out with probably an ACE score of 0. And this is what typically they might experience. 1 in 16 might smoke, 1 in 69 are alcoholic, 1 in 480 are IV drug users. And then they found 51 of those 100 would usually typically have an ACE score between 1 and 3. And you can see as you go across what happens as we're talking about health issues and we're talking about chemical dependency. So we go from 1 in 16 who smoke to 1 in 9 who smoke. And then if you have an ACE score, then 16 of those 100 would be having an ACE score between 4 and 8. 1 in 6 would smoke. And I find it interesting too in the suicide attempts. That's the very last one. I think that's huge. If you have a 0 ACE score, typically 1 in 98 would attempt suicide, 1 in 3 ACEs, 1 in 10, and then you're looking at 1 in 5. So it's not just a kid problem. It's not just oh, that's so sad, we'll try and help you out. It's truly an American problem, a universe problem, something with our health and our well-being. Next slide. And this is interesting, and I apologize. I repel technology, so the fact that this microphone wasn't working totally didn't surprise me. I'm like, yeah, I'm happy this one's working. So I tried to cut and paste, and I apologize. I know it's very fuzzy, but if you'd like to look at this in more detail, Iowa ACEs 360 would give you a clearer. This is they did a breakdown for ACEs in Iowa by county. Like, what is each county? What's the percentage of ACE scores? So they said they coded it for 4 or more ACEs. So you can see Lynn County over here is kind of an orangey color. Johnson, where I live, is more of a red. So you can see, wow, that county has a lot of high ACE scores. Or that's interesting. I didn't know that county would have some so low ones. So it's very interesting, and like I said, I know it's hard to read, but if you'd like to delve into it more and look at it online, Iowa ACEs 360 is where I found this slide. All right, next slide. So so you're like, great, Julie, you've really depressed me now. Thank you. So glad I came to listen to you today. So what can we do, right? Is it hopeless? No, absolutely not. So what can we do? Next slide. This is my suspense. What can we do? Well, the first thing we can do is, right, being a faith community, we can begin by really supporting and listening to each other's story, right? So being informed, I think, is the first piece. Like I said, changing that perception from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. How can I help you? And realizing that that child who's running away, or that child who's swearing, or that child who's grabbing scissors to protect themselves, it's not about you. It's something that happened with the child. So taking a step back and not taking things personally. So being informed. And then also supporting those who have a trauma background or who have higher ACE scores. So listening to them, getting them the community resources that they need. And what can you do as an individual? Well, you can take time to breathe and find a bit of quiet. And as a mother of 4 boys, that never happens to me. So sometimes my bit of quiet is that 10 minutes in here where I just get to sit and go. So yes, even, I wish I could have more quiet, but we do what we can. So having that quiet to get out of your emotional brain and your reptilian brain and upshift to your neocortex. Meditating, go for a walk in nature. Go to a oneness blessing. There's my plug for the oneness blessing. Yeah, you knew I'd, put it in there, right? Yeah. So we are offering a oneness blessing, and that is a wonderful opportunity. And the nice thing is you don't need to do anything. You just sit there and experience just the divine energy. So I invite you after, and I will never deprive anyone of food. So feel free to help yourself to lunch and then come join us in the back chapel if you'd like. Also changing our thinking. So this is my teacher in me, the check for understanding. Those of you, yeah, I know. Some teachers are like, yeah, I know what that is. Yeah, good old Madeline Hunter. Change your thinking. So what's wrong with you to what? Gold star for you. And then I don't know, again, this is a technology thing, so we'll see. I had a quick YouTube clip for Just Breathe. Look at that, things are working. We must be out of Mercury retrograde because things seem to be working pretty well. But this short clip shows us that even kids can learn to take that time to still their mind and understand what's going on in their brain. So we're going to watch this clip.
I get really mad when I have hits. I don't want you to say you don't want to play. When I'm mad, my brain can get a headache and it can start hurting. Your blood keeps pumping because you're really mad. So you start to get sweaty because you're getting really, really mad. And then when you start getting really mad, you turn red. When your body can't really control yourself, mad just takes over your body. I just get out of control. It's kind of like if you had a jar, and then the jar would be your brain, and then you put glitter in the jar, and that would be your... If you shook up the jar and the glitter went everywhere, that would be how your mind looks. And it's like spinning around, and then you don't have anything to think. And you sometimes punch stuff and people when you don't really mean it. When I get angry, I feel it in my heart. I really don't like when I get angry. The amygdala really reacts, but the prefrontal cortex tries to keep it down. I like to get really angry, I just sometimes, take deep breaths. First, you find a place where you can be alone, then you find some way to relax and calm down. When I need to calm down, I take deep breaths. I breathe in through my nose. Sometimes I close my eyes or just take deep breaths. falling down is not like moving. It's like slowing down and then it stops. The heart pumps slow and then it goes into your brain. It's like all the sparkles are at the bottom of your brain. My brain like slows down and then like I feel more calm and then I'm like ready to speak to that person.
Don't you love when the kids are talking about the brain? I'm like, oh, wow. So I wanted to, again, say thank you. Hopefully you've heard something that maybe you're able to take with you, a perception change. But I would like to end with a great spirit prayer. There's been a lot of talk in our country about going back to your country. But I want to recognize and honor those that came before us, the people whose land we are on. And I think it's important just to recognize that and be with that. So if you're able, please stand. And we are going to say, for my conclusion, the Great Spirit Prayer together. O God, whose voice I hear in the wind, whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise that I may understand the things you have taught to human beings. Help me to remain peace-filled and strong in the face of all that comes toward me. Let me learn the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. Help me seek pure thoughts and act always with the intention of helping others. Make me always ready to serve you, coming into the place of your constant kindness without shame. Thank you.